something we haven't tried before. It was a great idea that Josh had, which is to just have a town hall type meeting where there's very, very little talk and presentation from us at the outset, but where we invite questions, comments you have on what's happening at the school. It's a good time to do it, beginning of the second semester. Obviously, there's been a ton of change that's affected us in the last year, at the federal level, at the state level, at the university, on campus, and we're happy to talk about what the implications are for degrees that you may be considering as an addition or an internal transfer, or that friends of yours may be considering who are applying here to Hamilton Lugar. We can talk to you if you want about sort of financial and budgetary issues at a high level that are happening at the school. Obviously, we can hear your comments and feedback on things that are happening in the school community that we can respond to, but also just kind of keep in mind as we do our jobs as deans. So I think you all know who we are, but just in case, Isak is our Assistant Dean for Undergrad Education and Student Affairs, David is our Executive Associate Dean, and I'm John, I'm the Dean of Hamilton Lugar, and just excited to be with you tonight, and I would love to turn right away and just open up to see what kinds of questions that you might have for us, and or topics that you'd like to chat about in the town hall.
And given our size, I feel like everybody has to ask a question. At least one.
There we go. Lacey's a volunteer. Thanks.
So I've been getting a lot of messages from students about scholarships recently, and also had conversations with colleagues. I realize it's maybe too early to tell, but I had a student email me about FLAS the other day, and I was like, yeah, that's non-existent at the moment. Is there any possibility that like FLAS or some of those other types of scholarships may return next academic year or within the next several academic years?
I can answer this because a couple of days ago, I went down to this meeting of deans of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs in Washington, and the Deputy Secretary of State presented, and so I stood up and I asked the question. I said, sir, you've spoken a lot about the importance of international education. Can you tell us concretely what's the outlook for the Title VI program, which includes the FLAS scholarships, which has moved now from the Department of Education to the State Department, and other programs like Fulbright and Diplomacy Lab and so forth. And his answer kind of went as far as possible away from my question. It was not, I just want to be honest, it wasn't terribly encouraging. He didn't have anything at all to say about the future of that. And our government affairs people also haven't heard about the outlook for this. Most people who follow this in DC, whom I've spoken to, expect that things will kind of return more to normal at some point in the next few years, but we can't say when. There still is a demand for it. There still seems to be a robust agreement across partisan, across the partisan aisle, that this is important for the country and that it's worth investing in. This administration obviously has decided to switch it off for a while. I can't say with confidence when it'll come back. We're doing everything we can, of course, to explore other possibilities for student funding through gifts, through grants from non-governmental foundations and so forth. But right now, we've heard zilch on the immediate future for Title VI and for FLAS, I'm sorry to say.
We are lucky to have a Senator, Todd Young, who is very supportive and is very well aware of what Hamilton Lugar does in terms of language instruction, and understands the importance of the FLAS program. So we're hopeful that will make inroads at some point.
Who else?
As degrees are getting cut through federal and state law, how will that affect non-academic staff, academic advisors? Will there be cuts to those positions or things like that?
We're doing everything that we can not to have to cut staff positions. Now, there are cases when somebody will depart and we won't be able to backfill it, at least not in the immediate future. Our budget outlook is very tight, university-wide, as I'm sure you know, and also at the Hamilton Lugar School. We had a number of factors that have contributed to that. One is that the federal government has announced that it was going to reduce the rate of indirect cost recovery, which means the overhead paid on large grants like National Institutes of Health. And although we don't know where that discussion will settle, most estimates are that we'll get at most half of the indirect cost rate that we've had on grants in the past. And that's millions and millions of dollars, and so the university has to make that up somewhere. That's one factor. A second factor has to do with the expanding cost of benefits, including health benefits and others, such that it outpaces inflation and it creates additional strain on the university. A third factor is the state government's decision to cap undergraduate tuition for the next 2 years. And maybe that's a great thing. As a taxpayer in Indiana and as a father of 2 younger children, I think it's great that we're trying to make public education affordable at the flagship state university. But as you can imagine, that's a real strain for IU, because the way university budgeting works is that there's an assumption built into budgeting years ago that was made that that tuition would keep going up a few percent per year. So when that then flattens out, then 2 or 4% of a very large number is itself a large number. A further factor is, of course, the cut in this year's 2-year state appropriation cycle of 10% to the state allocation to IU. So when you add those things and a few other factors together, increasing IT costs, the spending of a fund that had grown up over decades to support IT and now comes onto our budget because the fund has been expended, all of that leads to significant crunch at the university. We're not immune from that. We're trying our best to kind of maintain all aspects of our mission and maintain all of our staff positions in light of that. But we're not out of the woods yet, so we have to continue to be very vigilant so that we don't need to reduce our size and numbers.
I might just add one clarifying point. You talk about, and amongst the positions that you mentioned, a lot of those were student-facing positions, and I think that the broader context here is that the student experience, we're committed to it here. This is across IU. We have a set ratio for what advisors to student numbers are going to be. Those are all sort of costs that aren't really negotiable for us as a university. So a lot of the things that we're talking about here are outside of that core function of what we do as a university in terms of student services. And so I just wanted to, I think, clarify that as well. A lot of, as many as there, I think, has been reported that a lot of degrees have been cut. It's true, right? But as many degrees have been consolidated. And so I think the important message to also share is the fact that students can still study all of the things that, that they want to do here at this, huge university. There are a lot of, but we're just changing the ways that they can do that in a lot of cases, right? And so I think that's just an important thing, that from a student's perspective, I don't think that there's going to be a huge tangible change anytime soon to their experience on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, just to add on to that point, because sometimes I think from the outside you can hear kind of degrees being cut, therefore there's a whole bunch of stuff that students used to be able to study that they're not able to study anymore. And that's really not the case. The consolidation process is such that, for example, we're doing degrees in regional studies at both the undergrad and master's level, and that's going to allow for some important synergies, and it's going to allow students to cover almost all the material that they covered before, but in a somewhat different way that I think is going to be quite appealing to a lot of students. So area studies and regional studies, which has always been a strength here, remains a strength, and I think we're really committed to that.
Could you possibly, Eli 5, ESOC probably knows what that means, but explain it like I'm 5 years old. How did HB 1001 affect Hamilton Lugar? How did Hamilton Lugar react to that? And how will students now see impact from that bill? And how will future students be impacted by that bill, positive or negative?
So you mean with respect to sort of how our degrees are changing? I think by and large that the state law that requires us to rearrange some of our degrees puts us in a better position. It was interpreted by a lot of people. If you read the newspaper, building on what David said, if you read the newspaper, there are these articles out there that suggest that all of these things are going away at IU, especially in the humanities and languages and area studies. It sounds like the roof is caving in. Actually, before that law was ever passed, the three of us and others in the room were in conversations about, okay, how are we going to strengthen the connective tissue between different degree programs, both undergrad and masters in particular. I think we agree that at the doctoral level, there's a real case to be made for keeping the degrees attached to the departments, separate, and maximizing on depth. But at the BA and MA level, I think all of us agree, we don't want somebody to come into the school and just to get a depth or just to get breadth. We think that the comparative advantage of this school is both. That you get breadth in terms of cross-cutting global issues and you get depth in a particular region. In fact, that's something, coming back as I mentioned from this APSIA Dean's meeting, when I compare us to the other 50 or so top international affairs schools in the world that were represented, we're probably the best, number one best, at critical language and area studies instruction. There are lots of programs in that room who are strong in general international affairs, but we can add something that they can't. And we want to protect that and preserve it. So, back to the state law, how does it affect us? Well, what the state law says, for those who haven't read about it, or maybe not for a while, is that degrees underneath certain thresholds are presumptively subject to be eliminated unless a case can be made for their preservation or unless they're merged into something larger or consolidated. None of this affects those of you in the room who are already in degree programs. You can finish your existing degrees the way that you signed up for, the way that you're planning, the way that you're taking your classes. But for students who arrive in the fall, a degree that was on this list that was below the threshold would be subject to one of these outcomes: elimination, merger, consolidation. So at the doctoral level, it's 3 students graduating per year minimum. Sounds like really small, but for a doctoral program, that's normal. Most doctoral programs don't have more than several students graduating per year in the humanities and social sciences. For a master's program, the threshold's 7. For a bachelor's program, the threshold is 15. Lots of our programs fall below those thresholds because we had things like an MA in Latin American and Caribbean Studies or BA in Central Eurasian Studies, where by design, these are not going to get a ton of students. The whole point is that we're giving people specialized opportunities for things that very few universities teach, or at least that teach well. So what we've done to respond to that is, at the bachelor's level, we've taken our existing BA degrees in Central Eurasian Studies, in East Asian Studies, and in Middle East Languages and Cultures, and we have proposed a new degree that would encompass all 3 of those, called BA in Regional and Comparative Studies. This BA degree in Regional Comparative Studies has 3 majors. You can major in Middle East, you can major in Central Eurasia, or you can major in East Asia. Going forward, we have an agreement with the college that others can add majors to that. So for example, our African Studies program is already working on an outline for a proposal to add an African Studies major. Other majors could be added for other world regions. India Studies has an intent to propose a major in the future, for example. So undergrads should be able to come in, they sign up for this degree, and then they can still do every course that they can currently take in Central Eurasia or in East Asia or in Middle East or these other fields. But they can also take a few new classes that we're creating. So they'll take a comparative kind of cross-regional class at the outset. They'll take a shared methods class. Why is this good? 2 reasons. One is, again, that connection between breadth and depth. We don't want people just to have specificity. We want them to see connections across different societies, world regions, and so forth. And secondly, cohort effects. Do you want to be part of a major that has 5 students or part of a major that has 50 students. It's probably more interesting socially, more chances to learn from one another, to be in a slightly bigger cohort. So students in this new degree will be part of a larger cohort, but still able to do all the classes, all the specialization that they could do to this point. And ditto for the master's level, where we had a number of small master's programs, and we're combining them into something called a master's in international and regional studies. Right now we have a master's in international studies, then we've got all these area studies master's degrees that were very, very small. In some cases just 1 or 2 students a year entering. And now we can have them be part of a larger cohort of a few dozen a year, and they can, again, take all the same classes they could take in their specialty area, plus a few new ones that we're establishing that are cross-connected. So for all of the terrible press that this has gotten, I actually think that it's sort of done us a favor in that it's mobilized us to do something that makes sense for the school and for our students. I think this is a better set of offerings that we're going to have going forward. I don't know if David can say anything.
Is there a plan to protect student resources and staff from censorship via funding, as we've seen at other universities? And what will that reaction look like from IU admin?
The university, I mean, it's about students, it's about staff, it's about faculty, creating a space where people have free expression and where we also are in an environment where lots of different ideas can be expressed. So there are ideas about free speech protections, there's academic freedom, which is not exactly the same as free speech norms. And then there are questions about sort of civil discourse and diversity of viewpoints and backgrounds in a forum like this. How are those represented? At the university level, I can say that the chancellor, the last 2 meetings, so every month we have a meeting where all the deans sit around in a circle with the chancellor, about 12 or 15 people, and talk about whatever the chancellor thinks is sort of the most important high-level thing for us to be concerned about as campus leaders. And the last 2 of those sessions have been exclusively devoted to these topics. So the chancellor came and had been a dean of arts and sciences at Purdue, which for at least the last few years has been ranked very, very high on these sort of national lists of freedom of speech. Obviously, you're all aware of debates on this campus about free speech. That's why you're asking the question. And his aim is to put IU where it belongs, which is back up at the top of those lists. So this is a place where free speech is very much honored and recognized, where the administration defends it. We have an opportunity in the year ahead, because of the celebration of the Declaration of Independence, to have a series of events that spotlight the importance of sort of civic engagement and discourse. But I mentioned those 3 things sort of as partners, because in my mind, if you only protect free speech, but aren't concerned with other values and norms, you have one set of outcomes. If you only worry about sort of protective, comfortable social spaces, you have possibly a silencing effect. There needs to be a sort of a mindfulness to both of these. That is to say that we want people to have maximum freedom of expression, but we also want people, I'll speak for the Hamilton-Lugar community, to communicate their views to one another in a way that invites engagement, listening, dialogue, not in a way that silences, obviously not in a way that threatens, and so forth. And so I do think that there's a high-level commitment in this campus administration to free speech, but I want you to know that we're also, every time we talk about free speech, we're also talking about how does that relate to interests in encouraging diverse identities, viewpoints, and so forth in the conversation, because that's much easier said than done.
Just one quick, and you could speak to this too, Carrie, but there have now been, for example, multiple events that I participated in personally where we are grappling with really hard issues with students. And so, my background is international law, and so, I've participated in multiple events on Israel-Palestine and what international law has to say about that, and engaged with students from a variety of different perspectives. So I think we're trying to really walk the walk in terms of having events where multiple viewpoints on really controversial issues can be heard. And so I think that's, you don't feel like sometimes there's a tendency to kind of try to run away from controversial topics, and I think we do not want to fall into that. We have to run toward controversial topics as a school. And so, that's why we do these events and why we've had these global competencies sessions where we try to get students practicing talking across divides on hard issues.
May I ask, you said something about funding?
Yeah.
Could you elaborate? I don't know how.
There's been conversations that I've heard and read about censorship through funding, like funding being cut because certain classes are taught or certain mindsets are allowed to express within classrooms.
I'm sorry, I didn't respond to that portion of your question. Of course, there's a lot of concern given what's happened nationally about the university being a target for defunding for reasons that that might not align well with our mission and our values as a university. This university administration has tried to maintain a very positive and constructive set of relationships in Indianapolis and in the federal government with an eye toward protecting IU from let's say unwanted attention in that regard. Now, are there cases in which somebody could be defunded and that the reason could be perceived as political, and where the university would have to try to address that? Still possible. We have foundation accounts and other funds that we try to mobilize where we can if we lose funding for any reason, including that. If there were actually sort of, let's say, external challenges to IU on the basis of what IU instructors are teaching in the classroom, topics, viewpoints expressed and so forth, I do think that the university leadership has a role to defend that, but I don't think defense always means a megaphone. Sometimes defense is done in private meetings with state or federal officials and so forth. Sometimes it's more appropriate to sort of take to the loudspeaker, and this administration has certainly said time and time again that it's working assiduously in a low-key way to try to defend our values as an institution and our institutional freedom and integrity. And my guess is that will continue to be the favored approach.
If I could just add by way of comment that in faculty meetings before, I think the question was put, somebody raised the question, a faculty member raised the question, can I teach about genocide? Can I do this? And I remember David's response, which was, you teach what you need to teach for your subject matter. So it was a full-throated defense of we're not putting restrictions on that. Now that said, you could hear from the question that was asked, there's a chilling effect from this. And so the biggest chilling effect comes on those who are employed, those who are considering proposing and asking for money to fund and so forth. But it's the much bigger effect, I think, is that chilling effect from am I putting something forward that's going to get me in trouble, rather than anything coming directly down on top says you can't talk about that. People have the most freedom with regard to this are students. When something comes from the students, great. Nobody's going to fire the students. That's.
The way that the university has interpreted SEA 202, which is the state law that refers to sort of diverse intellectual viewpoints and so forth, and that's most directly germane to this question, is that it's essentially interpreting it as a truth in advertising law, which is that if you say you're going to teach a course about genocide, teach a course about genocide, and make sure that your reading list reflects an array of sources on genocide, that it's not just one particular viewpoint the entire semester, that you've got readings from multiple different authors and so forth. But more importantly, that you don't say you're going to teach a course on genocide and then in the second session say, actually what I want to talk about is immigration policy, or what I want to talk about is abortion policy or something. That what the university interprets the intent of that legislation to be primarily is that students know when they're walking to the classroom what they're getting, and what they're getting is meaningful instruction on a topic that is of interest to them and relevant to their career aspirations, and not sermonizing by a professor on his or her chosen topic. And I know that that's very, very challenging to navigate in practice. I know that almost any example I come up with, you'll say, well, there could be a connection there. I will speak, and I'm sure this is true at the university level, I can certainly say it at HLS, we are here to defend our faculty's ability to teach topics that are meaningful, to engage in meaningful conversations, including, as David said, in sensitive topics. If somebody generates a complaint because they're dealing in a topic that's sensitive, like genocide, and it comes to my desk, my first, second, and third instinct is going to be, I want to find out what the legitimate basis was for that conversation, what the faculty member and instructor's intent was, and defend them. Okay? So we are not in any way trying to limit or have that chilling effect. I'm merely telling you this is how the university officially has been interpreting that particular piece of legislation, is that if we're straightforward about what we're going to cover in a class, that we have a lot of range to be able to discuss that topic. But if we stray far from the topic that's advertised in the syllabus, that's thinner ground. And it probably should be. As a student, or as a parent of a student, you want your kids to know what's in the syllabus, what's going to be taught, not to have a sort of a U-turn midway through. So to me, that's a reasonable way of us thinking about this. There are cases that come up with SEA 202 where faculty have been accused of violating this sort of intellectual diversity norm. Most of those cases have been summarily dismissed, haven't even gotten to the faculty member, because the people who reviewed it on first instance said there's no merit here. There are a few cases where it has been referred to the instructor, and where there's just been an informal conversation. Let's talk about what was going on. Could this have been misinterpreted, and so forth? And those have been resolved easily. There are only a couple of the cases that have been brought up where there's been any finding of a faculty member violating or potentially violating that law. And I'm not at liberty to talk about the details of them. None of them are here in the Hamilton Lugar School, but you can read in the papers that there have been a few such cases. We're obviously concerned to make sure that we provide the right kind of support and guidance to instructors so that nobody kind of stumbles into that, but also that, again, that we defend people who are in there doing their job as teachers, engaging with difficult, important topics that matter in the world.
Hello. So I would like to ask about the point you made that in the case of external factors, possibly for political reasons affecting faculty or leading to defunding of certain research or teaching. And it's not so much of an abstract possibility, because actually we have already lost the FLAS, Foreign Language and Area Studies fellowships for graduate and undergraduate students. It's a direct result of the Trump administration sending notification that teaching foreign languages and area studies does not align with the president's priorities anymore. And so I'm a FLAS recipient, a master's student in Egyptology, who came to Indiana University solely because of the funding that I received in order to complete my degree. And I received one email from Carl Pearson, who just runs the FLAS office, 1 to 2 weeks after the term started, that I would no longer be receiving my fellowship and stipend. And then
zero communication from the college itself or the dean's office about that issue. We did, of course, receive communication about the changes to degree programs, but that seems like it's mainly affecting undergraduate students. And so I'm wondering why there's been a lack of communication from HLS to graduate students, and if the university and the college does have a role to defend its faculty and students from political attacks, then how come nothing is being done to support students who were promised funding? Because like, I'm 24 years old, I don't have $30,000 for tuition and housing, and I was a TA last semester, but because it requires 60 undergraduate students to allow the hiring of a singular TA this year, this semester my professor's class didn't fill to 60 students, and so now I'm just completely out of luck, but haven't been offered any other support or like avenues of, oh, you should look into this department or, you know, this fellowship or something else. And, you know, said that like most of the people in this room won't be affected by the degree changes because the undergraduate majors are getting folded into each other, but there are graduate students who are really struggling and who have not been offered support by the school. I understand that you have to operate within a larger university and it's nothing is up to one person or one set of people, but I really just want to know like what's been going on behind the scenes in these discussions that you have with the chancellor every month, and like, does this come up, and do I come up? Like, do your students who are struggling right now because of political attacks come up in these discussions at all?
I'm happy to start, and David Isak can add. First of all, I'm sorry. Number one, sorry about your FLAS award not being renewed. I think what the federal government did on that score this year was disgraceful. To allow it to wait until the second week of September. I believe I learned on about September 11 when we got the letters that it was going to be canceled. I'm also sorry that you haven't felt adequately supported by all facets of IU and the Hamilton Lugar School, including my office. I'll tell you what we did with regard to FLAS, and to answer your question about what it looks like behind the scenes, what are we talking about? In the springtime, we knew that there was a high risk that Title VI would be canceled. And we had a series of conversations, including the three of us, including a couple of others in the room, including the directors of the FLAS granting centers, to say, okay, so do we award FLASs or not? And there was a robust debate on that. Some people saying, no, we shouldn't award it because it's raising expectations and we think there's a good chance that these will be disappointed, that students will arrange their affairs over the summer to attend school in the fall and have the terrible experience that you suffered of arriving on campus, enrolling, and then not having funding. Others saying, no, we should absolutely award them because the students have earned this recognition, which can still be, which can still be reported on their resumes. They still are winners of this award. They were recognized for their excellence, as you were. And we decided that we would recognize people for their excellence, issue the awards with bold-faced language that I wrote myself and checked off on all the letters and provide to everybody to say, you're winning this award, and then a whole big bold-faced paragraph. You should be aware that there is a significant chance that this will be canceled, and we do not have resources to backfill FLAS. Unfortunately, because of the budgetary issues that I mentioned earlier, we at the school level simply cannot replace more than $1 million that we had hoped to award in federal FLAS fellowship money this year. And so those notices went out, and then again in whatever it was, August or something, notices about the fact that there's continued uncertainty, advising students to think about this before enrollment. And like you, we were terribly disappointed that the notice came in September saying that these promises would not be honored by the federal government. It's jarring to me as a citizen and as a former government official that we had made promises to some of our best and brightest that it was still part of an active grant cycle and that it was then terminated. We're still, as you mentioned, the references in the letter, that it was being terminated because it wasn't aligned with American values. I think it's very much core American values, what we were supporting and what you earned, rightfully. So I'm very sorry about that. As for communication from us, if there was a problem where you didn't get the communications I just referenced, then we have to look into that and figure out why you didn't. But we tried earnestly to provide both the recognition that you earned, and also very, very clear warning under the logic that our graduate students as adults are best positioned to make the decision about their level of risk tolerance and whether they wish to enroll in the fall or not. I'm very, very sorry that it didn't, that the funding did not come through.
I'll just echo, obviously, the remorse here. Just adding one part of your question about, what type of conversations are we having, particularly on the question about TAs, as you mentioned. Probably one of the most frequent points of conversation that we have all throughout the year is how do we make sure that as many of our grad students as possible are getting funding, particularly those who came in with some type of expectation that they were going to get it. And we, I don't know if you think I'm overstating this, please say so, but I feel like, we try to turn over every single rock, right? And it's hard though, because sometimes the finances is just like, we can't make things appear out of nothing, right? And we're working within, we don't print money, right? So we have to work within the economy that we have, but still, we spend hours upon hours upon hours working with individual faculty members across all of our different units saying, okay, what is it that you need? Where do you expect this to be needed? How do we help this? How do we promote this? How do we make sure that this fits well, that our students are taken care of? Who are the people that need to be taken care of, right? So these conversations are happening constantly, and it's something that we're always talking about as well. Like, how do we improve that to make sure that that's not just a figure on a piece of paper? I think over the last 2 years, it's been something that we've really, we haven't gotten an answer to this yet, but really that, we're talking about you, right? That we're not talking about just some grad student, up in the, we get that, you are human beings who have a livelihood, and that, and that your success as a student here is going to be dependent on the type of environment that we can provide. So, that's at the forefront of our mind and the discussions that we're having. One of the most prevalent conversations that we're having. So, again, though, sorry that we haven't really come to a satisfactory answer in every single one of these cases.
No, that's right.
Other questions, comments, thoughts that you'd like to share?
Hi, I apologize for coming late. I'm a psychology major, and I know that you guys have the Global Service and Peace Corps prep program through HLS, and that's something I'm interested in, and I've talked to advisors about it, but I know the program's kind of weird right now because no one's been hired, so I just wanted to come and ask if there's sort of a timeline for that, of when I should be looking out for stuff, and yeah, thank you.
It's a fantastic question, and thanks for asking it. Yes, we had the person who was directing, just for everybody's background, the person who was directing this program left at the beginning of the year, and we've tried multiple people saying, hey, would you like to lead this program? Would you like to? Most people are like, no. So at the moment, as of now, I'm now sort of functioning as the administrative lead of that program, just so that people can get their approvals done, so that people can get into the class. We have somebody teaching the capstone class, so that's now functioning again. So if you're interested in doing it, set up a time we can talk about it. It's a super open degree program. It's kind of very self-led in the first place. It's mapped to the expectations of the Peace Corps generally, but then goes a little bit further to sort of map with the values of the school as well. But there's so many. It's 15 credits, but you can take them across departments, all across the university. So I'm really happy to talk through that curriculum with you, and then work through any approvals that you might need to get that happening. But yeah, that's something that we're committed to again. And this is, I think, a great example on the same theme of things that we've been committed to. That program 2 years ago had 0 students in it, right? And for all intents and purposes, we could have just said, well, don't have any students, great time to shut it down, right? And over the past 2 years, we worked really hard to build it up to now having like 18 students, which doesn't feel like that many. There was a time when we had like 50 in this program, and just the way that things go. And so, but it's something that we're committed to still. We're trying to make it work, and it is. I think it's now in a place that it will be fine. So if you're interested in doing it, I really think you should.
Oh, I was wondering if maybe you have any advice for maybe some of the older undergraduates who are starting to think about careers or internships in international affairs, international relations, and who are eager and excited to get that ball rolling and starting to think about careers, but maybe who are also a little bit uncertain, or maybe if you all keep in touch with any HLS alumni, recent graduates, and maybe what some of their what their experiences have been like post-graduation.
Yeah, you go.
So much to say on this. First off, you need to meet Catherine Ntiamoa right now. Have you met her yet, Director Ntiamoa?
Yeah, I've been in contact with her.
Okay, good.
Like over email, maybe.
Yeah, but you really should meet her. Is actually an HLS alum before HLS was HLS, but so it was an international studies alum. But she's overseeing right now all of our external partnerships and really thinking about how to activate pipelines into things both now for students and later, as well as Dr. Ellie Cohen, I think, are two people you should connect with sort of now. We have a really active alumni base, particularly of young alums, and during all of our events, the GAP Symposium, ARW, those are all designed with the intention of connecting you with people who are sort of just out of the experiences that you're having now. So I think that's available. We're doing that on a constant basis. You just took a class where the whole idea was to put you in front of people who can help you connect with things that you may or may not want to be doing. We also have the DC program that we just launched that started yesterday in Washington DC. We have a campus in DC where you can actually take courses that will count towards your major and totally integrate into your degree path here. I think in a lot of students we also have a summer program there, so we now have the semester program and the summer program. A lot of students have done that in their junior and senior year, sort of launch pad into DC. So those are some specifics of things we're doing right now to really help and connect you with this big community of HLS grads. What I'll say in the broader sense of advice, trying to go into this field and then pass to David, is that really flexibility is a virtue in this space. I think that the people who struggle, who graduate from our school and struggle, which is not a lot actually, but the number of students who do, a lot of times have very specific wants, right? They're like, I want a job in this location and this specific job doing this specific thing. It's pretty hard for anybody, right? Even us, to sort of look for jobs in that way. But the people who are like, look, I have a general sense of a why, the type of things that I'm trying to achieve in the world, the type of people I want to be around, the type of organizations that I want to work for, and otherwise I'm pretty open and flexible. You tend to have an easier go at it, and so I think really that broadening of exposure and having a clear sense of what's your theory of change, what's your why here, I think will really help.
Yeah, just a quick, in addition to everything Isak said, I think it is important to be flexible and to think about different sectors. And so, a lot of students, I think, were understandably very alarmed as the budget cuts hit, the federal government and things like USAID disappearing. And so there are clearly certain government pathways, the traditional pathways in international affairs that I think are more complicated right now than they have been in the past. Or non-existent, some of them, yeah. But there are still a lot of pathways, some still in government, and then a lot, if you think about the non-governmental world, if you think about the business world, you can slash funding for certain government programs, but international issues do not go away. And so those issues are still there, and when it comes to the corporate world, the NGO world trying to deal with those issues, there's still going to be a need for people. And then I think, honestly, some of the government stuff I think has to come back online ultimately. And we're actually starting to see that already. So, yeah.
I'll add one more thing, which is that when you think about an international career, it's in line with these points about flexibility and openness. Be thinking about what kind of, and talk to people who are doing jobs that you're interested in, that you find interesting. Just take them out for coffee or lunch when you have the opportunity. Like if you're doing an internship, don't have the only interaction be with the person, sort of when you're handing off the report. Invite them out for lunch and just what makes them tick. Is this something that you think would align with your interests and your aptitudes? And then build in your mind an idea of, well, what kind of competencies do I need, not over like the 1 to 2 year horizon, but over the 10 to 20 year horizon to succeed in this field. And a lot of those competencies are not actually, as David's suggesting, that specific to your topic of interest. For example, I know a lot of people who wound up in foreign service type jobs, who started in government working with the Department of Labor or Agriculture or Transportation, but what they got out of that was they learned how complex bureaucracies work. They learned how interagency process worked. They learned how to write a memo, whatever set of skills that they took with them to the next level. Most international issues require some mix of different kinds of actors. As David was suggesting, they require some NGOs, activists, corporations, government agencies, international organizations, and so on, religious groups. Learning how some of those entities function is a valuable addition to your skill set. One thing that I find in retrospect is really a great thing about working in the domain that so many of us are interested in is that you get rewarded for versatility and therefore you get rewarded for variety. It's not like being some very specialized type of scientist who has to do the same thing for 20 years so that you're the most sort of knowledgeable about that one area. You can spend a couple of years working in a corporation, a couple of years going out in the Peace Corps, a couple of years in a law firm, a couple of years in your congressional office, and each of those will make you a better, well-rounded athlete in that space. So that's meant to be a stress-relieving thing. That is to say that you can afford to be quite open-minded about what opportunity looks interesting, confident that it will actually help get you in the direction you want to go.
Hello, my name is Kami. I'm a first-year grad student in international studies. I'm participating study abroad program this summer, and I wonder that if there is any available funding opportunity for grad students. I've already got a small part of funding, which I really appreciate, but in light of my financial status, it's not enough amount of money, so I'm actively looking for any funding sources of opportunity, but I found that most of the funding is designed for undergraduate students and domestic students, so I got rejected multiple times from many organizations, so I was wondering that HLS have a funding opportunity for international students or graduate students. Thank you.
I don't know that we have any that are specific to international students or graduate students. We have a bunch of, we call them foundation funds, the funds where donors give us gifts and then we hold them in funds and are able to either use the interest or also the principal to fund certain things. And recently what we've been working on with the development office here at HLS is to try to loosen up some of the restrictions on those funds, because historically a lot of them are very specific. Only if you study country X, or only if you're from the state of Indiana, or only if you're getting credit for this particular activity. So we're working to try to loosen those strings, in part to be able to support activities like yours that might not fall into the original categories. It's hard to know without knowing exactly about your program and looking back at our accounts whether we have any funds that would be applicable to your situation. I believe in the study abroad website in HLS we have some of the resources, but I think you're probably right that those are mostly undergraduate focused. A majority of our available funds for study abroad are undergrad focused, but that doesn't necessarily mean all of them. You think they're mostly open? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. certainly most of the people who have taken them, I think, are undergraduate. But that's great. So if most of them are open, then you should be able to apply for them through that portal. Isak, do you have any more details?
Absolutely. I think, and Chris, you might know better, the deadline is February 1st for the summer consideration for study abroad. It should just be on our website. So if you look up, but I'm interested in your point about, who else you can talk to. The department is obviously a good place to go to. Directly to your supervisor. And then figuring out there. I think the other thing that we often work with students to do is say, like, what else can you get out of this trip? Can you make this? It's not just a study abroad, but can I also make it a research trip? So there's funding for research, or are there other things that sort of could be appended on to this overseas experience? So really happy to work with you on that. The person to contact at HLS is Dr. Ali Cohen, who can tell you all about graduate funding.
And I mentioned the thing about the gift agreements because I want all of you to know, not just you particularly, but everybody in the room, that we're really trying as much as we can to have any resources available to any of our students. National, international, grad, undergrad, area studies, international studies, whatever. Any other comments, questions that you all have?
So earlier you commented on commitment to having all of the programs, but are there programs that are getting cut, and if so, is there a number there? Or be that bachelor's degree, master's, doctorate programs, are there any getting cut, and if so, is there?
There are some programs that are slated for elimination under the law that we were earlier discussing. That is to say, they're marked officially as degrees that are eliminated. The important thing, the substantive answer to your question is, we are not getting rid of any area in terms of regional or thematic expertise that we've taught in the past. We are preserving the opportunity for students to continue to specialize in everything that they could do previously. They may just do it through a different architecture. So there is no substantive area, there's no area of the world that we're disinvesting from. There is no substantive topic, security, international law, human rights development, and so forth, that we're disinvesting from. But sometimes the structure will look different in terms of the degree or the major that would be designated.
One more thing. Do you have any comment to incoming undergraduate or graduate students who fear that these might not be here in a year, that might not be here when they arrive? Do you have any comments to these students to alleviate those fears?
I would first and foremost encourage them to get in touch with us so that they can talk to us and hear from us and be able to ask questions, express any concerns they have. I read the newspaper, so do they. I understand why they're concerned. I want them to reach out to us so that we can put them at ease. The second thing I would do is tell them to look at the course catalog. We haven't canceled anything. We have 1,100 classes and we haven't canceled any of these topics. We haven't gotten rid of any faculty. We haven't shut down any area study centers. And we're going to do everything we can to maintain excellence in all of those areas. So I very much encourage and welcome that conversation. I hope students will come ask us that question because I want to be able to answer it to correct some of what impression they may have in the news. Anything else? If not, maybe we'll let you get on with your oh, sorry, yeah.
Sorry, I have a quick question, because there's some confusion with this last semester. I was wondering if you can clarify some things on funding, like with the Dean Scholarship, because I had applied, and then I was told that I couldn't receive it again for having received it in the past, and there was no mention on the website. And in considering some other HLS opportunities for the summer, going forward, like internships or things like that, I wanted to know if this is still a feasible funding option or if that rule is strictly enforced.
So as relates to the Dean Scholarship specifically, which is, that doesn't actually exist in a fund the way that the Dean was just describing it. That's money that we give to students because we think you should be doing a thing. That scholarship, we only give it to a student once. All the other ones, the funds and those type of things that we may prioritize a student who's done it before, get multiple times. And so that I think is the distinction. Again, going back to the earlier point, just strategically, the thing I think about a lot of the times is we want students to get, and our funders want students to get a lot of diverse experiences. And so if you're doing, and this is particularly for undergrads, I think it's a slightly different answer for grads, but if you're doing, hey, I did a study abroad, and then I did this, internship, and then I did a research project, all of those may have different funds